I used to work at a steel fabrication plant in Ohio, the kind of place that eats your bones one shift at a time. 12 hours of machines hammering, conveyor belts screaming, sparks flying. You don't talk much on the line because the noise is constant, like living inside a thunderstorm. Most guys quit within a year. I lasted 4. Not because I loved it, but because it paid better than anything else I could get at the time. Rent, bills, food, all of it depended on that factory. This story happened during the last year I worked there, and it's the reason I'll never step foot in a factory again. It was a night shift. Those are the worst. The plant at night feels wrong. In the day, you've got managers, inspectors, visitors, a sense of movement. At night, it's just the skeleton crew, a few dozen of us spread out across a warehouse big enough to swallow a football stadium. Machines pounding away, but the spaces between them are dark, hollow, and quiet. I was working the press line, basically feeding sheets of steel into a giant hydraulic press that could flatten your arm like paper if you weren't careful. Safety was drilled into us, but accidents happened. Everyone knew at least one guy who'd left the plant missing fingers. Around 2 a.m., I noticed something strange. The press line has a rhythm: clang, hiss, release, over and over. After a while, your brain tunes it out. But that night, between the cycles, I thought I heard something else. A voice. Faint. Just a whisper under the machines. I froze, leaning closer. It wasn't one of the guys yelling down the line. I know that sound. This was closer. Behind me. Help. I spun around. Nothing but the dark stretch of the factory floor. Forklifts parked in the shadows. Sparks from a welder down the row. I shook it off. Told myself it was just fatigue. Night shifts mess with your head. But then, a few minutes later, I heard it again. Louder this time. Help me. I stepped back from the press, wiping the sweat off my forehead even though the air was freezing. Ear protection muffles a lot, but when a voice cuts through the machines, you know it's not in your head. I called out, "Who's there?" My voice disappeared into the factory noise. Nobody answered. I walked a few steps down the line, past stacks of steel sheets waiting to be pressed. The overhead lights flickered. Not unusual, they always buzzed and stuttered this late. I kept scanning the shadows, but all I saw were forklifts and pallets. Everything still. I went back to my station, trying to shake it off. 10 minutes later, the voice came again. This time I was sure it was right behind me. "Please, help me." I spun around so fast I nearly tripped over a stack of scrap. Nothing. Just the empty aisle. That's when I noticed something. A dark stain on the concrete. Just a few feet behind my press. At first I thought it was oil. There are always leaks in that place. But this stain wasn't fresh. It was old, almost black, and shaped strangely, like it had seeped outward in all directions. I crouched down, running my glove across it. The concrete was cold, rough. The stain wouldn't come off. I went to the break room on my next pause, still unsettled. One of the older guys, Frank, was there smoking a cigarette even though the sign said no smoking. He'd been at the plant for 20 years, knew all the stories. I told him about the voice, the stain. He didn't laugh. He didn't even look surprised. He just exhaled smoke and said, "That's line 3. You don't want to know." "Tell me," I said. He shook his head. Back in '09, a guy got pulled into the press. Machine jammed, locked up with him inside. Took him 6 hours to cut him out. They say what was left a mark on the floor. Some stains don't go away. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. But there wasn't one. Frank stubbed out his cigarette, stood, and added, "If you're hearing him, you're too close. Keep your head down." Then he left me alone with the hum of the vending machine and a chill crawling up my spine. I didn't want to go back to line 3 after that, but I didn't have a choice. Quotas don't stop because you're spooked. When I returned, the stain on the concrete seemed darker than before. The air around the press felt heavier, thicker somehow. I kept my eyes on the controls, refusing to look over my shoulder. But around 3:15 a.m., the machine jammed. That wasn't unusual. Steel sometimes warped, pieces slipped. But this jam was different. The press froze mid-cycle, hydraulics hissing like the machine was holding its breath. I hit the emergency stop and pried the sheet out. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach knot. On the sheet of steel was a handprint. Not grease, not dirt. A perfect outline of a human hand pressed into the metal, as though the steel had been soft clay for just a moment. I dropped it, heart pounding. Nobody else was near me. Nobody could have made that. Then the voice came again, clearer now, almost in my ear. "Why didn't you stop it?" I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the dark aisle. And I saw him. For half a second, a figure stood in the shadows. A man in a hard hat and coveralls, face blurred, body shimmering like heat over asphalt. He lifted his arm, pointing at the press. Then he was gone. The machine roared back to life on its own, cycling down with a slam that rattled the floor. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the stain again. My knees buckled. I knew then that Frank hadn't been telling some ghost story to scare the rookie. Something really was still here. The rest of that shift felt like it lasted a week. I kept my eyes glued to the controls, refusing to look anywhere but forward. When the horn finally blew at 6 a.m., I was the first one out the door. But I couldn't let it go. That weekend, I asked around about the accident Frank mentioned. Most of the older guys brushed me off, said not to dig into the past. But one, an electrician named Dale, finally opened up. "Yeah, it happened," he said quietly, like he was afraid the walls might be listening. "Back in Mo9, name was Kenny. Good worker. Line jammed, he reached in, and the safety failed. Press came down before they could stop it. By the time EMS got here..." Dale shook his head. "There wasn't much left." I asked him what happened after. "They shut down the line for a week, cleaned the whole floor, but the stain never came out. They repainted twice, even tried acid wash. Still there. Guys started saying Kenny didn't leave. You know how people talk." He looked at me hard. "Why are you asking?" I hesitated, then told him. The voice, the handprint, the figure pointing at the press. Dale went pale. "You need to be careful," he said. "Every man who's heard Kenny, something bad's happened to them." "What do you mean?" I asked. Couple years back, Joe on night shift swore he heard Kenny calling his name. Week later, he crushed 2 fingers in the press. Another guy said he saw Kenny standing by the lockers. Next shift, he slipped in oil and shattered his ankle. I'm telling you, if he's talking to you, it means he's looking for something. I left that conversation shaken to the core. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about the voice. Why didn't you stop it? I wasn't even there when Kenny died, but somehow he was blaming me. And deep down, I knew I wasn't done with him yet. When I came back for my next night shift, I told myself I wouldn't let it get to me. Just another shift, just another 12 hours of noise and sweat. But from the moment I stepped onto the factory floor, I felt it. The air was colder, the shadows deeper. Even the machine seemed to pound in a slower rhythm, like a heartbeat waiting to stop. I kept my head down, fed the steel into the press, tried to focus. But around 2:30 a.m., it happened again. The press jammed. My stomach dropped. I hit the stop, pulled the sheet out, and there it was. Another handprint. This one smeared, like someone had dragged their fingers across molten steel. Then I heard it. Why didn't you stop it? The voice was louder now, more desperate. I spun around, flashlight beam cutting the darkness, and froze. Kenny was standing right there. Not a blur this time, not a trick of light. He was clear as day. Hard hat, coveralls, face pale and streaked with grease. His chest looked crushed inward, caved unnaturally, like the machine had left its mark forever. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over a pallet. "Stay away from me," I whispered, though I doubt he heard. He didn't move. He just pointed at the press again. His eyes locked on mine, empty and endless, and he said it once more, louder this time. "Why didn't you stop it?" My throat went dry. "I wasn't here," I choked out. "It wasn't me." For a second, his face twisted like he understood. Then he vanished. The machine roared back to life on its own, slamming down with a force that rattled my bones. The hair on my arms stood on end. That was the moment I knew. Kenny didn't want help. He wanted someone else to take his place. After that night, I couldn't look at the press the same way. Every shift felt like walking back into a trap. I kept thinking about Kenny. Not who he was when he was alive, but what he had become. The crew noticed. I was jumpy, pale, barely talking. Frank pulled me aside one morning and said, "You've hurt him again, haven't you?" I didn't answer, but he saw it in my face. He just sighed, lit another cigarette and said, "Some stains never wash out. Best thing you can do is quit before he chooses you." I laughed it off in front of him, but deep down, I knew he was right. The last time I saw Kenny was 2 weeks later. It was another night shift, dead quiet, except for the pounding of the presses. I was working slower than usual, double-checking every sheet, every movement. Around 3 a.m., the power flickered. The whole line went dark for a few seconds, then sputtered back on. And there he was, standing in the aisle, closer than ever. His coveralls torn, his chest caved in like a hollow drum. His lips barely moved as the words echoed in the air. "You didn't stop it." I froze, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He lifted his arm, pointing not at the press this time, but at me. His eyes locked on mine, and I felt it. This pull, like the weight of the machine, was pressing down on my chest. My ribs ached. My lungs burned, like the factory itself was trying to crush me. I stumbled back, gasping for air, until one of the guys grabbed my shoulder. "Hey, you okay?" he shouted over the machines. I blinked, and Kenny was gone. The weight lifted, but I knew then I couldn't stay. I finished that shift, walked out at sunrise, and never went back. I quit the next day. No explanation, no goodbyes. It's been years now. I've worked other jobs since, but I still dream about that factory floor. The stain on the concrete, the handprints in steel, the voice asking me why I didn't stop it. And sometimes, in the middle of the night, I wake up to the sound of metal slamming shut, and a whisper close to my ear. "You didn't stop it." Thanks for listening. That's how this story ended, with a factory I'll never step into again, and a question that still haunts me. Have you ever worked a job where the past never let go? Drop your story in the comments. Someone out there needs to hear it. And if this one gave you chills, hit like and subscribe. More real stories, raw, haunting, and unforgettable, are coming soon.